Hi everyone, I'm Liang. I'm now a lecturer in sociology at Uni of Manchester, and today we have Eva.
Thank you, Liang. My name is Eva Lee. I am lecturer in screen industries at King's College London. Researches on fandom, East and Southeast Asia, queer media, and digital media, a little bit about AI and fandom as well.
Today, we are going to talk about something that many people are familiar with, but that is also often misunderstood: fan culture. When people talk about fans, they may immediately think of celebrity worship, fan communities, common control, chart boosting, celebrity scandals, fan fiction, shipping concerts, and perhaps also the question of whether fans are too obsessive or too traditional. But as fan study researchers ourselves, we are interested in asking a different set of questions today. Why does fan culture deserve to be taken seriously as a research field? And what can it tell us about emotions, gender, sexuality, platforms, labor, intimacy, and the circulation of Asian popular cultures across borders? So that's the brief idea about this talk. To open today's questions, we will discuss why should we take fan cultures seriously today. So to begin, I would like to ask Eva, how did you come to study fan culture?
I start doing fan studies research, I guess similar to many people. I was a rather typical good student when I was young. So I study hard, I do okay in exams. And all of a sudden, when I was a secondary school student, I became a fan of a Taiwanese girl group. It was a surprise to a lot of people because they thought I'm rational, I'm very calm, and I shouldn't be doing things like the crazy fangirls, idol worshipping. But what struck me is that in that fan community, and it is a time that we have internet forums, so Facebook doesn't exist, social media doesn't really exist yet. But I went to internet forum and then I was really shocked by how generous and friendly people were there. So it's a fan community that really makes me curious about fan community in general. Pretty much a long time ago, but it was interesting because the people I never met them, and then they don't mind sending albums to me, and
Yeah.
sometimes they don't even ask for money back. You're a student, I'm a student, but you are doing this labor of love. I went to university, I did my master's studies, and my master's studies is the queer fandom of a Hong Kong singer. And it was the time that I went to do participant observation in a concert. And it was the place where I find like a lot of queer, probably more queer women than anywhere you can see. And then I started feeling, okay, it's not just about fandom, it's about community, it's about visibility, it's about the sense of belonging, even it's just within the concert. And then I start seeing the connection of fandom to a lot of other sociological phenomena, right? Belonging, identities, inequalities, visibility, representation.
This is quite interesting. When we trace back to fan history of ourselves, we trace back to the early 2000s. I don't know what were your case. I was a primary school student then,
Okay. Yeah.
and my first fan identity was a K-pop fan. Also in internet forum, and then moved to Baidu Tieband, Baidu Postbar, and then write some fan fictions. That's also my entry point for the later boys love world as well. So when I was in mainland China, back to then, it was still heavily influenced by the Japanese and Korean popular culture as well as the Taiwanese popular culture. I watched a lot of romance melodramas. Yeah, what was those girl group you are referring to? From
SHE, the OG of like shipping girl group. I wasn't really shipping them. I was attracted by Ella.
Zhongxin, yeah.
Not Zhongxin, but she's very feminine and she's very open that she had boyfriends at the start. And then later, I noticed that there were quite a lot of queer fans of him. I didn't understand why at the time. Those three of them were really cute, very queer. They called each other 老婆.
Fan culture triggers our own interest in studying on identity, community, gender, and sexuality as well. Just a context for our audiences. So we are more or less from a sociology background. For Eva, so she's trained as a sociologist from undergraduate to postgraduate, right?
More like British cultural studies type of sociology.
So I would like to ask Eva, so what's your entry of the fan studies?
That's a good question. I think my sociology program back in those days at the University of Hong Kong is very much with the tradition of media and cultural studies, British cultural studies, like class analysis, Stuart Hall. So my entry point was Stuart Hall, about audience reception. And gradually I realized that the like Stuart Hall reception studies model is very much about post-war British society, which is about class rather than gender and queer.
My route is a bit different because I first know fans from Henry Jenkins, the textual poachers, and it was during my undergraduate back to around 2010. And I learned poaching from the original media and textual products and to generate their own meanings by writing fan fictions, producing fanzines, and produce different kinds of fan arts. So back to then, I was so fascinating about that. Okay, there's a field that treating this cultural phenomenon seriously, not as something like trivial or something to condemn the fan culture. They are irrational, they are too emotional, they are too passionate, but treating them the cultural meaning producers. So I was so excited to learn about this idea. And after years of repeating that idea, like textual poaching, convergence culture, or participatory culture, I was bored of this idea. But before I share my idea, I would like to ask Ava's thinkings about this and how this specific fan studies concepts and how do you consider them from the beginning until now?
Yeah, I think very similar trajectory. Like when I do my master's studies, I look into like Henry Jenkins' work and then John Fiske, more classic work, even a lot of other work about everyday Matthews or like everyday practices like resistance, that kind of like very typical resistance cooperation. And it was fascinating, like as Liang mentioned, like to a student who have always felt that fan studies has been trivialized, has been stigmatized, has been looked down upon by other people, like this is not serious enough to be studied. So it was fascinating. And I think I also start getting a bit bored that like we need a more like careful language of talking about resistance, and we need more nuanced analysis. And I think the turn in early 2010s, like when scholars start talking about fan labor, I think that changed quite a bit. So from creative practices, fans production, creativity as fan labor, that definitely opened up a lot more rooms for critical analysis, new lens for understanding expectation, empowerment, make things less simplistic. I think I don't like the idea of very simplistic analysis. That's just too straightforward. That isn't really capture the complexity of like fan community, fan dynamics.
Yeah. Now you can see why we are close friends now, because we both have the discontent or dissatisfaction about the oft-used simplified resistant model that is from the British cultural studies to the fan studies, right? And even now, if you read some papers about new cultural phenomenon, like the capybara, and how those fans of capybara are doing their resistance against those normative cultures. So we are tired of it. Like everything is resistant, or everything can be resistant. But if we look at more closely, it is much more than a resistance framing that can address it. And it is not just resistant because it also contains compliance with the normativity. So if I wonder, like, how do you think about the resistant model, like with reference to some like empirical studies you have done before?
Yeah, I think theorizing resistance is about contention. Whether people you interview, they're actually articulating that. Are they really aware about that? Or for them, it's just all about fun. It's like they love writing fan fictions, right? They love writing GL fan fictions. They like doing a bit of gossiping, like forensic looking into like, oh, are they having skinship, or are their social media messages secretly aligned with each other? And at the same time, they also derive something else, I argue, fans in particular. So you ship, or in a queer fandom, you also find your own people. You perhaps through gossiping celebrities having a relationships or not, you also explore your identity. You also like make use of the language to talk about like, oh, I don't like this dress because this dress look too masculine. Like it is not my taste. So naturally making a lot of meanings about bodies, about heteronormativity, homonorm a queer person should like. There might be some element of resistance in it, but I don't think it's able to capture everything that fans do. Because as I mentioned, it's a lot of complicity, it's a lot of negotiations in between, and we can try to tease out a bit more about the details.
So simply framing something within fan culture or within popular cultures as a resistance to normativity can be a very reductionist route to adjust to the cultures they are speaking about.
It's a bit lazy.
Yeah, work.
I think the field also shift a bit, like cultural studies as a whole political project as well. Think about like grassroots resistance. Yeah, I think it's the framing we also start looking at like more complex levels like platform policies and rich audiences who pay a lot of money. I think the landscape also changed a bit. Yeah.
Another point, like to now turn labor or fans active participation on digital platforms or across platforms and their afterlife, working as free labor or labor being exploited by the companies and the overall cultural sector. So, think more about turn to fan labor. So, what's the now to turn from the resistance model and now focusing more on the fan labor, leading the fan studies?
That's a good point. I can immediately think about all the references like we can quote. I think part of that comes from the idea that fandom is a gift economy in the sense that it is not like operating as a like capitalist economy. You pay and then you get something. It's like working for free, right? Like you write fan fictions, but then a lot of people can benefit, can enjoy the gift you produce. And flipping a little bit around is actually a lot of free labor, because like it takes time. Like student, you give up your sleeping time to write fan fictions, you spend money on your internet, your computers, and it actually costs you money to produce free gifts for other people. So I think that is really start capturing the complex nature and the complex media ecosystem nowadays. From there, we can see a lot of different types of labor. So audience are not passively receiving, like you are retweeting, you are sharing, you're reposting. And I mean, even before the days of social media, when I was interviewing Yuchun fans during my PhD, they're already doing that. They buy a lot of music albums and then distribute for free for friends and relatives. It is both monetary labor, but also free labor, because you do the distribution yourself. And I mean that they support the capitalist system? Not really. But they are trying to make sure that if their idol is famous, they will have more content. So it's fans are doing the work to prove that, fans are working very hard to prove that their taste can be monetized, can be commodified. Because if they make their celebrities more famous, they get more content. And then to make them more famous, they have to work harder to promote their idol. So labor idea as a very productive entry point to look into how media and fans nowadays are not really just like resisting each other, but they sometimes work together, they sometimes hate each other, they sometimes love each other.
Yes. I think a confluence between the fan studies and digital labor studies and the platform studies nowadays. So because fan studies or fan culture are getting more and more popular and then being commercialized, and there's the platformization process, and their labor are no longer treated as gift economy. So they are active cultural producers, and the cultural producers are exploited by the cultural industries and the cultural sectors. That's Mel Stanfield, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's about exploiting fandom.
Yeah, but fans' works or fans' practices are more complex than being exploited. As you said, that they are also actively resisting the exploitation or extractive logic within the cultural sector. Right. We move on to discuss more about fan cultures in general. So I would raise up the question first. So the thing is, like in the European cultures and the particularly East and South Asian fan cultures are largely different, and we have quite distinct routes to think and approach the fan objects. Either it's celebrities, influencers, or like they are fans of footballs or fans of buses, subways, etc. But that is also a reflection of the overall knowledge production process. So when we're researching about, for example, the K-pop idols or J-pop idols or Chinese celebrities, we keep reference to those classic fan concepts. Like you are researching K-pop idols, you are referencing participatory culture, convergence culture, textual cultures, but that may not neatly or can speak efficiently about what is happening within these fan cultures. So how do you think about this kind of problem?
First, I mean, Henry Jenkins' work is really laid the foundation.
Yeah.
The point that it is so successful that it kind of just like changed the field in a way that I just sometimes feel like, it becomes something that's quite fundamentally changing the field. We probably do not need to reference it all the time because it has done all the contributions and inspired a whole new range of work. So that's why we can actually reference the word that was inspired by Henry Jenkins instead of always go back to Henry Jenkins himself. And I think this is like something we can talk a bit more later about knowledge production, right? And the point about East Asian fandom and like Euro American fandom differences. I always have this conversation with my colleagues who are British and they have been a fan. I just keep thinking about what is such a differences. Like I'm aware that I don't want to essentialize. I mean, there's a one simple way people say, oh, because Asian are collectivists, that's why their fandom look this and that. And I don't think it is the case. I think probably it's because of different media system, different entertainment system, like how the internet reach or become accessible in Asia and how the internet become accessible. Like in the West, they have like MySpace and I forget all the name of those platforms. And then in East Asia, probably like things get compressed a bit more sociologically. And like social media, digital media, entertainment, and more like transnational, like conglomerate corporate media, so kind of like develop all at the same time similarly. And I think that actually, and also like Asian urbanism, like the urban environment that makes certain modes of supporting idol become more visible than compared to America or UK. So I believe it's essentially the different configurations of media industries, different media infrastructure, and also what kind of affordance of this platform enable fans, right? If the whole, I think we have to look a bit like more structural dimension of things, geopolitically speaking as well, like don't have to explain like why Taylor Swift fans behave this and that way because the American way of doing fandom is that universal sort of way. And then when we see K-pop fan, they are like different way of fan support, and then we say, oh, they are different and they are not quite what we understand. And in a way that it becomes exoticized by Western scholars. To a little bit about media history, about what kind of media infrastructure and system produce different modes of, or enable what kind of fan practices as options for fans.
Yeah, well, for either Henry Jenkins or John Fisk, they lay the foundation of fan studies. So, yeah, it's essential, or it's like I have to think about something that is quite unique within the East Asian fan cultures, like the data fans, or like charting bits, or like those. I remember the English translation, but in Mandarin it's called Zheng.
It's like the fan sites owner.
Site operator, owner, and also the professional fans. So they are like working close collaboration or cooperation with entertainment company. So they play a role in leading fan community and fan practices. So these phenomenon or fandom I mentioned are quite unique within the East and South Asian popular cultures. So when we are discussing and researching about these facts, these lived realities of fan cultures, if we reference those Western concepts, that will not be that efficient, right?
Yeah, I think that the example of Zhang Ge, how translate that, or is there anything equivalent? It's like at most is a fan site administrator, but I think Zhang Ge is a bit even more entrepreneurial because they have the equipment, or they have the equipment, but they compete with time, take excellent pictures, learn the skills themselves. Many of them are not professional photographers before becoming Zhang Ge, and then they can make a profit, and it's a very complex operation.
It's a more complex commercialization compared to the platformized or commercialized fan industries that has been explored by the scholars based in America or Europe. So in this sense, we may need more scholars to theorizing from the East Asian fan cultures. Think about what theoretical tools that emerge from these lived realities that can speak not just about East Asia. We will not also essentialize ourselves or like marginalize ourselves. This is unique to ourselves. Now we can speak more about mixed dialogues with more of the fan cultures. Yeah, I think we can discuss about the way we need to understand fan culture from Asia, just relevant to the previous discussion and our earlier today's discussion. We just ended our Queer HS Method launch event and now move to discuss fan culture now. Yeah, so based on our own projects, we can respond why we need to understand fan culture from Asia or from the specific research field we are concerned.
This is a question that we have been dealing with in our work, like why Asia? And I mean, so we tackled the question why fandom just now, and now it's like why Asia? Very straightforward because I'm interested in Asian media, but I need an academic reason to justify, right? Like you justify why you study like Madonna fandom, I guess, but you have to justify why you have to study Asian fandom. And my earlier work about queer fandom in Hong Kong, I was really using it as an example to understand queerness. So what does it mean by being queer in a society where it is not illegal to be gay, but not socially contested? And it is through queer fandom, I can see a lot more like different social debates and linking social structure to everyday practices to like more intimate affective consumption. So in a way that I use fandom as a very productive lens to look into all these. And my more recent work on Thai girls love fandom, the transnational circulation of Thai GL, again, I always tackle the question was like, in the West, people talk about, oh, we don't have enough like, women to women representation. But then they never really look elsewhere. They really like, we probably can talk a lot more. They are not looking elsewhere. And theoretically, I just think that like, a lot of queer studies, again, go back to our debate, queer studies come a lot from American studies in disguise. So it was certain assumptions about what queerness is like, what kind of social conditions produce certain kinds of oppression and marginality. And we have to move away from that in the sense that we shouldn't be just reproducing their knowledge. Fandom in East Asia become an interesting site for all the reasons I mentioned, like different media system, very complicated geopolitical situations about like all the post-colonial neo happening. And in fact, East and Southeast Asia is quite geopolitically chaotic if we think about how decolonization and post-colonial are taking place. So it become a very rich theoretical ground for us to really look into this area. And again, I might be repeating myself a little bit. Fandom is a very good anchor point to look into mediation process, representation, production, and then to consumption, marketing, promotion, government regulations, platform logic, participation, interpretations, even all the different commercial activities around that. So I would say Asia itself is interesting enough to generate theories about what fandom can be like in the future, or what queerness can be like in the future.
Your point, that is the very intense inter and intra-Asia cultural flows. That does not only apply to fan culture, but if we trace back from the earlier work by Wenhua, Yeah, about the J-pop's popularity across Asia, in particular across China, Korea, and Southeast Asia. So the very intense cultural flow actually happened for years, not just from the late 20th century. It can trace back to centuries ago. Either for the both of I'm concerned above Eva is currently researching on, it is a result and a shaping force of the inter-Asia cultural flow and dialogues. So to put the both of as an example, it traces back from the Japanese both of in the 1970s, and then it flows to South Korea and Hong Kong to mainland China from the 1980s, 1990s, and also traveled to Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia. And now we are witnessing a different thing, in particular from the 2010. We are witnessing the transnational influence of the boys love novels from China, witnessing great popularity in South Korea, Japan, and also across East and Southeast Asia. And we are witnessing the booming phenomenon of Thai BL now being a trendy thing across Asia and including South Asia. So the very intense inter-Asia cultural flow and the different directions of the flow is the most interesting part. Like previously from Japan as somehow the dominant or the hegemonic
center,
the core other parts of Asia. But now the center has become multi-center, right? Thailand, Vietnam, like different parts of Asia. So that's the most intriguing point and most fascinating point about the inter-Asia cultural flows, right? Yeah.
Just want to add one point about the inter-Asia referencing. I think I definitely see that happening a lot in the last decade. Back in the 2000s, when fans talk about queer figures, it's very common to reference like queer celebrities and compared to some current projects like queer audiences of girls love drama, the referencing is within Asia. It's definitely within Asia. They just reference like between Thai girls love or South Korean one or Japanese one or Taiwanese one or some other productions. Definitely seeing this area growing pretty strong.
Yeah, I would not say it's a splendid, unique point, but it's a very fascinating point to think and approach fan culture through Asia.
And if you are publishing in a journal article, it depends on the journals you're going for, right? It's academic gatekeeping. I previously have a journal article about Thai Y series, that is BL and GL, and queer baiting. We submit that to a top like international journal, and then we got that rejection. And the reason is that because Southeast Asia is not of interest to the readers. And I was like, yeah, you're overlooking our conceptual like intervention. That paper isn't inventing a new concept, but it's really trying to understand a concept in the Asian context, which isn't critical enough or bold enough, I know. But it was really fundamentally try to like reverse and propose an alternative concept to queer baiting. So we thought there's some innovation in it.
Very narrow-minded because it's not just about Southeast Asia, it's about theorizing from Asia, just a starting point or the anchoring site of Asia as a point to do the theorization. That's the truth or the fact of the academic population is still dominated and also somehow controlled by the Euro-American cultural or knowledge production traditions. We endeavor to change it. That's my bet.